This paper investigates how the global challenges of the 21st century have affected the Gulf region. Climate change, the disintegration of the family unit, high rate of divorce, and chronic depression amongst children and teenagers are all issues that require a much deeper understanding of how our contemporary built environment exacerbates these challenges. This paper will investigate the history of early settlement in the UAE, its rapid growth and its evolution over a span of 4 decades from the discovery of oil. The paper will then focus on a single building typology, the Courtyard House. These homes traditionally were common in the Middle East due to the fact that these highly introverted homes not only brought physical comfort and shelter from the forces of nature, but also helped cultivate a strong sense of family bond that is seldom considered in recent times. By examining the reason for the decline in popularity of the courtyard houses after the discovery of oil in the UAE, and by further analyzing a few successful examples of contemporary courtyard buildings, this paper looks at the possibility of a modern revival of the traditional building typology of the region, such as the courtyard. The aim is not a simple imitation of the aesthetics of the past, as typically prevalent, but rather a much deeper understanding of the nature of these traditional buildings. Why were they so successful, and how can they help address the challenges of the modern world? The UAE is a peninsular country with a coastline on the southwestern side of the Arabian Gulf, as well as on the northwest side of the Gulf of Oman. Geographically, the UAE covers an area of 83,600 square kilometers, with 3 distinct geographical zones: mountains, coastal, and the desert. The UAE is the confederation of 7 emirates. The economy of the UAE and the Gulf region over the last 2 centuries has been primarily a byproduct of its key geographical location, as a transit and connecting point between the Asian subcontinent and the West. Prior to the oil era, the majority of the region's exports was dates and pearls, with pearling being the backbone of the industry. It provided seasonal employment which accounted for the bulk of the GDP of the Sheikhdom, both through taxes and by the direct pearling trade. Some of the prominent historical ports were Julfar, Dibba, Dalma, and Dubai. As Fahad further explained in his paper in 2016, towards the end of the 19th century, demand from the European and American nouveau riche for the pearl reached an unprecedented high. The value of the pearl exports increased by 600% between 1873 and 1906. Unfortunately, this exponential growth was short-lived, and by the 1930s, due to the Great Depression of the growth of the Japanese cultured pearling industry, the Gulf region's pearling industry was hard hit, and as a result, many local inhabitants that were employed in the pearling industry were heavily indebted to the boat owners. Typical traditional settlements before the discovery of oil was characterized by a cluster of buildings that surrounded a Friday mosque, the ruler's house, and central courtyard neighborhoods. The main marketplace, or the souk as it was called, was typically located along 1 or 2 of these major roads leading to the town center or core. Small alleys branched from the main road, giving access to the private homes. Roads and alleyways widths was kept to a minimum in order to maximize land use and to ensure that building structures provided a cool shade at all times of the day. The separation of public and private space was of paramount importance in all traditional settlements, and as a result, most residential areas, or as they used to be called farij, were tightly clustered together based on tribal affiliation. The courtyard homes with flat roofs were the most common typology. The flat roofs with their high parapet walls were commonly used in the hot summer months to sleep on. As a result, the height of homes were standardized to 2 floors to ensure privacy. The construction method was determined by the settlement's location and the availability of materials. Poorer families lived on the outskirts of the settlement in huts made from barasti, date palms, fronds, and leaves. These huts were especially effective during the summer months due to the natural ventilation that was created by its method of construction and material. After a 30-year search, oil was discovered in the UAE in 1958, and by 1960 it had become an oil-producing nation. After the decline of the pearling industry, the discovery of oil brought some well-needed relief, especially to the indebted employees of the pearling industry, who started working either in the oil fields or the newly developed government sectors. Not being dependent on a seasonal industry and receiving a regular salary helped them gradually become debt-free. In order to reduce the burden on its citizens even further and help the nomadic Bedouins to settle in urban areas, Sheikh Zayed, the ruler of the UAE, from 1971 to 2004, established the first national housing project. The free housing for the Bedouins and the people of lower and middle class was a welcome gesture that provided property ownership for its citizens. Sheikh Zayed initially invited several international architects to come up with multiple design solutions for the first national housing, the Shabi house, but eventually settled on a very simple and yet highly effective single-story design that was based on a local vernacular design of a living room, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a bathroom placed on 2 sides of a courtyard. This design not only preserved the privacy of the family, but also accommodated the future expansion of the home based on the growth of the expanded family. With increasing export of oil in the 1970s, the UAE started a process of industrialization. Mega construction projects were established, supported both by the government as well as private investments, building highways, schools, hospitals, and new residential clusters. As a result, more skilled and semi-skilled foreign workers started migrating to the UAE, demanding the need for expansion of the traditional settlements. The traditional compact settlements with its distinct boundaries were soon dwarfed by the ever-growing development of the outskirts. Due to the limited vehicle accessibility of the traditional settlement, the function as the commercial and retail district started changing. Business and high-end retail started moving to custom-built districts and shopping malls on the outskirts. Almost all the original residents started abandoning their courtyard homes for walled 2-story, temperature-controlled villas built in the middle of a square or rectangular plot on the outskirts of the city. The original courtyard homes were rented out as either storage facilities or accommodation for low-income workers, and as a result, the demographics of the original settlements transformed within a few decades. National housing projects also started following the same detached, single-family formula, losing sight of the tradition, climatic, and cultural sensitivities of the original Shabi house initiated by Sheikh Zayed. Witnessing a decline in the price of oil due to a global shift from fossil fuels to alternative energy sources, the UAE over the last 2 decades has been developing strategies of diversification for its economy. Each emirate has created their own plan or vision, concentrating on different alternative solutions to diversification such as tourism, agriculture, and a robust manufacturing industries. Dubai's participation in the World Expo 2020 is one such example. The one common vision for the UAE has been to develop a strong knowledge-based economy that will help maintain and sustain its future generations' health and well-being. As a result, the vision of global cities is being transformed into reality in both Dubai and Abu Dhabi. As Arjan Apudarai described, The global cities of the future are being made from multiple scapes. The current and projected future of UAE cities is very much an aggregate of the different scapes. To name but a few examples, Masdar City in Abu Dhabi and Internet City in Dubai being a technoscape, City Walk in Dubai being an ethnoscape, Dubai International Financial Center being a financial scape, and the Dubai Design District being an ideascape. Other cities in the region are also starting to follow this model. As these future cities are developed, the major challenge at hand is twofold. How can this growth be sustained without impacting the environment, and can it preserve the social and cultural needs of its inhabitants? Courtyard houses are distinct due to the fact that by design there are dwellings that comprise of having all their main spaces built around a central courtyard, either on a single or double level. The walls of the surrounding main spaces or boundary walls shade the courtyard for almost the entire day. The only time that the courtyard is not shaded is during the midsummer days, and for that reason a large tree is usually common in most courtyards. All windows open into the courtyard, and their sizes vary based on their orientation. South-facing windows are typically smaller and shaded by covered veranda, whereas the north-facing windows are much larger. Some high-level windows facing the street or wind towers, or as they call them here, barajil, are occasionally provided to create a cross-ventilation and to allow for the hot air to escape. Courtyards have been around the Middle East for centuries, going back to pre-Islamic Sumerian pharaonic civilization. The courtyard houses were developed in order to address both the harsh climatic condition and to provide families privacy, which to some extent is still a reflection of the culture of the region. Even though the separation of male and female is very much ingrained in the traditional Middle Eastern Islamic culture, it is important to note that privacy is a universal value and a typical behavior exhibited in almost all cultures and societies. In the UAE, the courtyard house, beyond a climatic solution, provided a social and communal space. All family members were invited by nature to conduct their activities outdoors. The main feature of the courtyard, which is usually paved, is a central tree, often an Indian almond or occasionally a date palm. Plants in pots were also used to add greenery. Other visible features are the surrounding verandas and their decorative columns and arches, wooden balconies, and detailing such as the doors and the windows. Informal accounts from family members who lived in these courtyard houses articulated a very simple but yet comfortable and happy life. The courtyard provided a safe space that all family members worked and played in. Adults would go about conducting their household chores, while kids would play or do their homeworks under the shade of the central tree. Even though it is very difficult to separate nostalgia from the truth, these centrally located courtyards created functional, private, and thermally controlled environments, which helped create family quality time, which unfortunately is no longer the norm in most modern homes. Climatically, the traditional larger courtyard homes allowed its occupants to adapt and adjust between the winter and summer months by horizontal and vertical seasonal movement. During the summer months, the family would reside mainly in the south wing of the house, due to the fact that its north-facing windows sheltered it from the direct sunlight, while allowing the open windows to create a cross-ventilation. In the winter, the migration would work in reverse. Traditionally, the seasonal movements were quite simple due to the lightness and modesty of the furnishing. With the advent of modernization in the UAE, most residences of the traditional courtyard homes after the 1970s started preferring new modern temperature-controlled homes instead of their environmentally sustainable traditional courtyard houses. Only after 4 decades, the social and environmental impacts of such a decision has started to become apparent. Despite the green design standards and all the governmental efforts being initiated, the amount of energy being wasted as a result of incorrect orientation, disproportionate building opening sizes, and the over-specification of the mechanical cooling system is astronomical. By looking at examples of traditional architecture, such as the Courtyard House, we might be able to address the contemporary social, cultural, and environmental requirements of our building occupants. The aim of looking at contemporary possibilities of reintroducing courtyard design is not to proclaim the authority of the past, but rather to acknowledge its relevance in the 21st century. Since the use of a mechanically temperature-controlled environment and our reliance on fossil fuel is now being examined, it is worth looking at 2 of the 6 principles of green architecture as presented by Brenda and Robert Vale in relation to the courtyard and its potential benefits in modern architecture. Vale's second principle is based on working with the climate, which allows for a passive architectural design to provide thermal comfort for the residents of the building. In the UAE, based on its extreme summer temperature, reintroduction of the courtyard design could help in this process, but it is worthwhile examining a few international and national learnings that will help increase its efficiency. In order for a courtyard to provide shade during the summer and to gain sufficient solar radiation in the winter, the scale of the courtyard is critical. I have therefore looked at a 4-story multi-family residential complex in Dubai called The Greens, which comprises of a set of units looking into a large communal garden that houses swimming pools, basketball courts, and children's play area, in comparison to new courtyard multi-family developments in Beijing, China. Even though the Greens is a successful family-oriented residential project, and typical units facing the courtyard fetch a much higher rental revenue, unfortunately, due to the large scale of the central courtyard and its exposure to the direct sun, the space is uninhabitable for 3 to 4 months of the summer. Based on the Beijing modern courtyard house an example, if the large public space would have been broken into multiple smaller scale courtyards, these spaces could have been potentially used all year round. Alternatively, large courtyards such as the one in the Dubai Municipality building or the Louvre in Abu Dhabi work successfully both as a transitional and an open public space due to the fact that they have utilized both partial shading system and a body of water to naturally shade and cool the space. The partial shading allows for hot air to escape, while providing adequate shade to the courtyard all year round. Another great institutional building is the School of Natural Resources and the Environment at the University of Arizona. This remarkable multi-level building is built around a series of cascading extended balconies looking into a well-designed zero-scape central courtyard, which is a comfortable space to be in, even in the midst of the Arizona harsh, dry summer months. Vale's 4th principle of green architecture is respect for users, which is unfortunately one of the most neglected principles. This principle is applicable in 2 distinct forms. The first being the effect of construction material on the physical health and well-being of the user, and the second is the social and psychological consideration considered during the design process. For the sake of this article, I will be concentrating on the latter due to its relevance to the courtyard design and the UAE culture. Traditionally, the courtyards were strategically centrally located in the house to ensure the constant interaction of family members throughout the day. This communal space, open to nature, helped foster and develop a close family bond, which unfortunately is no longer apparent. In our contemporary society, most children don't get much time to spend with their parents, communicating and discussing their life issues and challenges. By reintroducing the concept of the courtyard into our modern single-family homes, both as a traditional space and a communal space, we can once again re-establish a sense of family unity, much needed in this fast-track world. As a result, through passive design, we can help create a much happier family and home. By studying the historical evolution of settlement in the UAE, pre and post-oil, and examining the possibilities of modern revival of a single historical design typology prevalent in the UAE and the Middle East, such as the Courtyard House, this paper has tried to partially answer the following series of important questions that Ashraf Salama called questions that will not go away. What are the sustainable qualities that should be associated with international ideas on entering the host culture, especially those pertaining to social practices? What are the social, cultural, and social behavioral impact that those ideas have on the locale, and how can their negative effect, if they exist, be reduced or hopefully eliminated? What will be the running costs of embracing such international ideas, and how will they affect the everyday activities of the average citizen? Can there be a position within social global aspiration for traditional ideas that are still relevant to today's culture in this region? This authentic regionalist approach to design should not simply look at a set of pure aesthetical elements and symbols, typical of tourist destinations, but rather examine the generating principles that traditionally created space that helped support communal activities, which was conducive to the health and well-being of its occupants. Only through the modern revival of these generating principles are we able to design spaces that can cultivate a better sense of well-being and happiness. The courtyard typology is but one example that can be reintroduced both as a single residential unit or as a large-scale commercial building.